You'd think with all the hysteria over trying to keep kids safe and of making somebody pay for not keeping them safe, you would think that the society that we live in would do a much better job. But in fact, for many, many years, decades, in fact, they have turned a blind eye to some things and totally been open to other things. They have decided, for example, that if you are a sports figure or a celebrity or a wealthy or powerful person, we can let you slide on the sex abuse charges for a good long time before we finally will do something, and then you have to really press it. On the other hand, we don't allow that, of course, for anybody who has of the average and ordinary type has the slightest whiff of maybe have been doing something, they get slammed. At the same time, we're very uneven still in how we prosecute and how much we sentence people to, how many years or months or weeks. We also allow many people to get away with it, depending on who they know or whether they're well connected, or in these very uneven mercy types of activities such as restorative justice. I'm not quite sure what to call them, whereby they have ways that you can redeem yourself in some degree for what you've done. We also treat women differently than men. Very often they get much less harsh treatments. And we also look at situations in, how can I put this? If you're an online harasser or something, or vigilante, the police in many cases are working with these groups, even though it's very common police practice not to, and to publicly say you're not to, that they will not engage with these groups and work with them. Nevertheless, this still happens that you work with these groups in certain places, and we reported on that, places such as Tennessee and out in Utah. And Homeland Security today is all about, looking like you're right on the front lines of working with getting the perps and the others off the street. At the same time, the truth is a lot more nuanced. So we do have a case that has gone international because of the celebrity of one of the stars. Vitali is his name. I'm going to put him up here. Vitali is a Russian vlogger. His name is Vitaly Zhidorevsky, and he was arrested on April 3rd for basically a harassment and a long series of harassment. Vitaly's been doing his deal since age 20. He's now age 33. He styles himself as a model, as a porn star, as somebody who likes to hunt down, as other vigilantes do, people who are accused of sex offenses. But he also does little annoying stunts that are even dangerous. He steals motorcycles and vans, for example, as he did in the Philippines. He harassed ordinary Pinoy people on the street. He attacked people, roughed them up at various times. He's just basically been a loudmouth jerk who has done anything to gain attention. Most notably, when he went to one of the games of the World Cup, he attempted to streak across the field at one of the games, and he was stopped doing that. So this is a guy who's just makes a living being a pain in the butt. And apparently, the Filipinos have had enough, and they decided that he will get between 10 and 20 years for his variety of stunts. He could get 5 years for each of five various charges that they have against him. Okay. And it just goes to show you how harassment is not allowed everywhere. In California, for example, you can be in serious trouble for doing that. You can actually get a court order against somebody and go after them. In Virginia, I haven't seen that exercise that much. That doesn't mean I know it. I don't, but I haven't seen it. But you do have to do it within a year or two. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And you have to gather a lot of evidence. You have to have screenshots. You have to have phone call recordings. You have to have a great deal, and you have to be certain of the identity. And in this area of great anonymity, trolls who are listening to this video right now, of course, are chuckling because they can hide behind all sorts of anonymous activities and names, and one of them said, "You can keep blocking me, but I'll keep coming back under a different name." And not being afraid of these people, I am happy to continue to go after them too. However, I always give them the opportunity to be educated on what's actually going out there. The simple fact that there are people who have this uneven sentencing or this uneven prosecution, it should be enough to warrant looking at this with a little bit of a jaundiced eye, how the legal profession pursues child sex predators, so called, or sex cases in general, and what the hysteria is in our society over the word sex. It's truly remarkable how we have such a childish and weird view of what actually goes on. We don't prosecute some actual child cases, as we've seen in places like Washington State. At the same time, we will put all of our energy into proactive stings that don't involve any real children because they have the most bang for the buck, because the public and the politicians will reward us more for that. By the way, these are in emails entered into evidence in the Net Nanny case out in Washington State, to give you one example. So this isn't my speculation. This is actual evidence in a court of law. So we have this particular case, and Mr. Zadarsky may end up getting 25 years in prison. At the same time, you have other cases out here, such as this one. This is from our regular session here in Virginia. In this particular case, you have a man by the name of Michael Haas. Mr. Haas was convicted in Powhatan County in 1994, so 25 years ago or so. He served, well, 23 and a half years. He served 23 and a half years for apparently forcibly sodomizing his two sons. The sons, however, recanted shortly after trial and conviction, but apparently it took a while for Mr. Haas to get an exoneration, like a lot of while, like a quarter century almost. And it was only when he began to go through the Innocence Project in 2014, all right? 2014, for God's sake, 11 years ago. And they began to investigate his position and his argument that he was released from prison in 2017. And this is an approval for him from 2017, right? 7 years ago, 8 years ago now, that his convictions were tossed out, and that because of the physical examination of his sons and the strength of the evidence, and two attorneys general from two different parties, you can see how you have to have a lot of ducks line up. He is released, and to compensate him, they have approved an additional $30,000 for every year that he was incarcerated, and on top of the $55,000 for every year that he was incarcerated now. Well, that's hardly the opportunity cost if he went on and got a good job up in this area and made six figures. That's roughly half of what he would get, but this shouldn't be surprising. I was in jail and I heard another one. He spent 28 years and he was released. But again, to the average and ordinary trolls and certain well-meaning members of the public, they never think that the court could have made a mistake. They want to believe that the court did not make a mistake. And that's laudable up to a point, except that when you see credible evidence being brought forth by people like me, by Citizens Against Government Entrapment, by Women Against the Registry, by NARSOL and some of these other groups, to Reform Alliance out of New York State, that the system is not doing what it claims it's doing, that should give you pause to think that there's maybe something else going on here, right? That should really give you pause that there's something going on. There's another vigilante case in New York State. Apparently, I don't have it up here, but in that particular case, what happened was the individual was working for the individual person who was a level 3 sex offender. He had consensual sex with a 12-year-old girl, but still a 12-year-old girl, and he spent 1 year in prison. but he was on the registry for a good long time. He was working for somebody who allowed him to do that, and then somebody began to harass him. The stories diverge at that point where his boss, who is now harassing him, claimed that he just learned he was a sex offender. And so the boss had posted notices around saying where he lives and where he works and what he does and what he did and what he was convicted of, causing potential harm to him. Who knows what happened? But he spent 1 year in prison, 1 year for having sex with a 12-year-old. But he's on the registry for God knows how long, and he was harassed for a good long time. And the man who harassed him finally, and this is in 2010 in New York State, finally is going to see a little justice and be fined and imprisoned for that. But it took a long time, and it's really remarkable how difficult it is to prove these cases and how the public uses the registry to punish people after they've already been punished, because in their mind, you did something with a child, therefore you should be punished. Remember, that goes regardless of whether you did something or you didn't do something. It doesn't matter in the mind of the public. If you're convicted, you're guilty. At the same time, these members of the public turn a blind eye to certain favorite sports figures that behave badly, certain musical figures that behave badly. And even though they may come on here and say, oh, no, that's not true, look at what happened with the Sandusky case up in Pennsylvania dozens of years ago. Look what happened there, okay? You know, what happened? You had a case where a winning coach and a winning team had a child predator in their midst who had been abusing children for a long time. Heck, after hours in his young person buddy mentor sports program that he was running on the side, caught him in a shower sodomizing a 10-year-old boy and did nothing about it. Nothing about it. And when it was reported to the coach, and it was reported to the chancellor, when it was reported to other officials in the university system, nothing was done. Okay, why? Because it was a winning sports team. That's why. And, you know, that's around the world, that sort of thing happens. It happens everywhere around the world. I want to show you another example of where that is. Okay, we have this example I just showed you of Michael Klaas. Here's one. This is out of France. Okay, and look what happens here. He raped me 3 times a day in an all too often seen case where USA Gymnastics, Larry Nassar case, and many, many others, again, winning situations, the public is just scandalized about sex. They've got to get those perps. They've got to take care of those. And here we have actual people around the world, children who are being treated very, very badly, but because they entertain us, because they make us feel like winners, because they are in the sports industry, because sports is big business, the sports people, the big business people, the business interests in sports, the public turns a blind eye to it until it blows up. And then it becomes a scandal, even though all along, many, many people knew what was going on and did nothing. So I'll tell this story here. Former tennis player Angelique Cauchy testifies against her ex-coach, Andrew Geddes, I'm going to pronounce it, in the French parliament. And she says that, you know, her tennis coach just a few years ago, okay, and you can see this woman is not 12 years old anymore. Just a few years ago, he was convicted of sexually assaulting 4 other teenage girls in France, had an 18-year sentence, okay? She started training with him when she was 12 years old in 1999, and she shares an ordeal that claims that she was raped 3 times a day, every day. She thought about committing suicide. He raped me 3 times a day, okay? The first night he asked me to go into his room and I didn't do it. Then he came into mine and the abuse was worse. I was in a prison and I couldn't get out, she says. She says that he also psychologically tortured her. He told her when she was 13 that he was suffering from AIDS. And this poor girl thought she had AIDS from age 13 to age 18. She's now a physical education teacher on a tennis court in her own right, and is finally telling her story. Okay. But she said that the Sarcelles Tennis Club president knew about it and they took no action. They were told repeatedly it was known in the tennis world that his behavior with young girls was not correct. When a woman complained to the club president, the answer was yes, but he brings us titles, she said. And isn't that exactly what happened in the Sandusky case up in the Nasser case and other cases? Isn't that exactly what happened? Okay. Uh, you know, it's amazing, the psychological abuse, telling her that they're dating. Okay, when you're 38, you don't go out with a girl of 15. Okay. And yet here we have this case over and over again where we have the public outraged about the penny ante stuff, the little things that the average and ordinary people are accused of doing or even convicted doing. But these things linger on the horizon forever. Look how long it took the Catholic Church and the Boy Scout cases to finally come to light. And there's plenty of evidence because they actually kept records of these things. Okay. They actually kept pretty sick records, but they also kept records of priests and others moved around or terminated or reassigned or what have you. And that was one of the ways that they were able to link to even new victims as well that they had previously not known about. Not to mention the abuse of Canadian children on reservations and other cases that are even more brutal than that. There was a case in Britain that I was in contact with, a person up there who was abused by the Jesuits over many, many years. The cases went to trial and they were let off. Okay. This person, meanwhile, seemed to me respectfully, uh, in the later emails, they almost looked like they were drug induced. They were ridiculous. I couldn't make head or tails of them. Um, People saw my channel. It's just remarkable to me how we have focused on the microscope on some of the little cases and blown them up bigger than life, even when there were nothing, and big cases that should have gotten big attention get no attention until they blow up and become great scandals. And then everybody, clutches their pearls and just, oh, I had no idea. Why didn't you have an idea? It had all the look of one: unrestricted access to young people, okay, no accountability, conflicting values, money, power, influence, titles, okay, and an almost godlike adoration of athletes, especially in small towns and in college towns. Well, what did you think would happen? Okay. So we have some real problems with this. We have vigilantes whom we allow to harass sex abusers and others, so called. Why? Because they are somehow helping us what? Make them purer, somehow making it better. But, people who even committed a crime deserve a certain peace and tranquility and get on with their life. Certainly, you can argue that they need to be monitored up to a point, but you don't monitor the grand larcenist. You don't monitor the person who steals a lot of money, uh, much longer than a year in many cases. All right. But somehow you want to argue, I guess, that children are better, more in need of care and concern. That's fine. But then why do you allow these other cases I just show you to go off the way they go off? And it's just pretty remarkable. Maybe what we need is to rethink how we address sex in this nation and look at how we understand sex abuse, harassment, and how we understand the laws in terms of, when you've done your time, you've done your time. Um, should Vitali get 25 years? I don't know. He's been doing this for 13 years, though, since he was age 20. So maybe, it seems a little off somewhere. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, constructive comments, not attacks. That would be great. This is Norman Michaelation for ICAC Unpacked. Have a good day.